Hello, Bible Geeks. We're back. It is season 7, and Bible Geeks isn't over yet. Hi, it's Ryan Schumacher, and we are here with the new series for the second half of 2021. This series is entitled The Old Testament in Today's World. We're going to be talking globally about Old Testament theology. It was inspired a lot by, we're still doing this as part of the adult education of the First Presbyterian Church of River Forest in River Forest, Illinois. And we're going through something called the New City Catechism right now, which is starting off in the Old Testament. It's a year's worth of catechism questions about the faith. And because we're starting with Old Testament foundational principles, the adult education community and I thought that it would be a really good focus for us to look at the specifics of Old Testament theology and how that relates to today's world. So anyway, a few housekeeping items. Yes, welcome. This is going to be done in a hybrid format as part of the class at the church. And so we'll be able to have both people over Zoom and I'll be able to be in person. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope that works out. I'm hoping this says we will be. That is irrelevant to those of you watching this on YouTube, but I think we'll be live streaming. More on that later. I will still continue to put these videos up on YouTube, maybe with more content. You can just search Bible Geeks on YouTube, and I appear to still be the first result that comes up, at least for now. So anyway, the topic here, when we're looking at the Old Testament, one of the proposed titles, at least my head for this, was Thinking Like an Ancient. It didn't really have the same kind of ring. Credit to my wife for coming up with the better title. But when you look at the Old Testament, we see things like, a God that seems violent and angry sometimes. Like, for instance, the story here of Sodom and Gomorrah. Or you have obscure long lists of commands, things about food, things about crops, things about the fact what your clothes can be made of, and when you can and can't come to the temple, and what the skin rash should look like, if it's okay for you to come back versus not. Which is not how we think of things here. And certainly if you have a skin rash, you go to the doctor, you don't go to the priest. We see story after story about story of, and then so-and-so was king, and, did evil in the sight of the Lord or whatever. But lots and lots of stories about monarchs. And then prophets speaking to the monarchs. Many minor prophets, we would say, speaking into a history that just doesn't make that much sense to us. It names geographies that we don't know about. It names people groups we don't know about. It talks about lots of wars. And this is just not how the world works today. Now, the challenge for us, though, is that we think the Bible is written for us. This is scriptural. I'm not making this up. When Paul was writing to Timothy, it's a very famous passage, especially if you're in the Reformed tradition. All scripture is God-breathed. It's profitable for teaching, reproof, correction, for the training in righteousness, so that everyone who belongs to God may be proficient and equipped for every good work, lacking in nothing in some other translations. So all scripture is God-breathed, and it's for these particular things, so that everyone who belongs to God can be fully equipped for everything. So we believe this about scripture. Incidentally, too, just as a side note, when Paul would be writing this to Timothy, the New Testament would not be completely written or compiled yet. So this is actually a reference to the Old Testament scriptures. Certainly it's fair to extrapolate it to the New Testament, but this is a specific statement. What would it have meant when Paul was writing at the time? Would have meant what we call the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. So the challenge, as John Walton, whose work is going to be very influential for this class, has put it, the Bible was written for us, but it wasn't written to us. You've heard me say this before if you follow Bible Geeks at all in some previous episodes or previous seasons. For us, but not to us. And this is very important. We in the 21st century are not the implied audience. What we have in the Bible is God choosing to inspire a message for us, mediated through ancient authors, people who wrote 4,000 years ago, people who wrote to their fellow humans 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And we can fall into a trap of thinking that God was saying something to them that didn't make any sense to them at all, but he's whispering to us. So they may have thought that the text meant this, but really we know now that what God really meant was that. So a good example of this, and we'll come to this in week 2 a little bit more, if we read Big Bang cosmology into Genesis 1, or perhaps even better, like, Psalm 19, like how God stretched out the stars in the heavens. That we think of, stretching, that's like expansion. And physics teaches us that the universe expanded from nothing. Oh, look, there's like Big Bang cosmology in the Bible. I'm sure they could find steady state stuff too. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But we can fall into a trap of thinking that the Bible means something that it never meant in the past, that the author could not have actually known what the author was communicating. And that's a very precarious place to be as Christians, because it means the message isn't timeless. It means that the inspiration was really meant for us here and nobody in prior generations. So we need to recognize God was speaking to the people at the time, using the author at that time. And the Bible cannot mean what it never meant. Now, you call that an assumption. That is an assumption. I think it's a safe one, though, because if we believe there's a timeless message in Scripture, then we have to recognize that we can't read our 21st century answers to 21st century questions into a 21st century BC document. Had to make sense to the people contemporary with the author, or else God was speaking gibberish, God was speaking code, God was not speaking clearly to people, and the fullness of the revelation could not possibly have been known until we, in our contemporary context, finally approach the Scripture with the totality of the natural revelation before us to truly understand what the Bible means. This is rubbish. That is not the way that the Bible works. We can't approach it that way. But what that means then is we have to get into the mind of ancient people, which is not easy. So the focus for this class is how did ancient people understand what's written in the Old Testament? And how can we take the message that God has been sending to those people and transfer it into our contemporary lives? This, my friends, is hard work. This is why we have scholars. This is why we love our scholars who spend this time. And so, some resources for this class, I would say, a book that I am going through along with this, John Walton's Old Testament Theology for Christians. You can see it right there. And then also the new NIV Application Commentary Series is great for this. It's kind of written this way, where you're looking at the ancient context and then you're trying to go to contemporary life with it. Its major flaw is that it uses the NIV, but we can forgive it. It's also written at it is a sophisticated commentary series. It is not too technical. You don't need to know Hebrew or Greek in order to understand the NIV Application Commentary Series. Highly, highly recommend if you want to do a real Bible study that goes slowly through and gets into the guts of something. Pick up a volume of the NIV Application Commentary Series for a particular book and just read the book of the Bible along with the commentary. I think you'll really enjoy it. All right, so the outline for the class. 6 weeks between now and the Sunday before Thanksgiving. We're going to look at the theology of the Old Testament through these lenses. Credit to the table of contents in John Walton's book for being 6 weeks long and therefore fitting nicely into my 6-week format. So the first question, who is Yahweh among the other gods in the ancient Near East? If you see me write ANE, that means ancient Near East. So who is God? The next one, what's the purpose for creation or humans in Yahweh's plan? So who is God? And then who are we? Or what is creation and how do we fit in? Next one, law and covenant. The treaty, the brokering of the norms of behavior that come through the Old Testament. There's many, many things in the Old Testament that focus on law and on covenant. Why? You'll learn all about Hittite vassal treaties. It's going to be great. What's the significance of the temple? Again, I mentioned that whole, if I have a skin disease, I'm going to go to a doctor. But in the ancient times, we read Leviticus and you're supposed to show yourself to the priest. What the centrality of the temple comes through very often in the Old Testament. What's the purpose behind that? And then we're going to get into some really interesting ones. If I'm going to get in trouble for this class, it's probably going to be in these last two. How does the Old Testament think about sin and evil? And then what's the Old Testament concept of salvation? It's not the same as the New Testament concept of salvation. And I think we need to understand that when we read the Old Testament. Now, that doesn't mean that the Old Testament trumps the New. It actually works the other way around. The New Testament is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. But when we're reading the Old Testament, understanding how it talks about sin, how it talks about evil, how it talks about salvation, and knowing the differences there so we don't project New Testament theology onto Old Testament texts allows us to hear what God is revealing in the Old Testament. So that'll be the point. So this first class, I will say too, I'm trying to keep this, I'm looking at my timer, I'm at 10 minutes. This might be okay. I'm trying to keep these a little bit shorter than you might be used to. Very practical reason. I want to get to choir rehearsal. So we're now doing this on Sunday mornings, and we're going to try and get through each of these in no more than an hour. And then I want to go sing right afterwards. So I'm hoping that we can get through this in maybe 45 minutes or so, and then have some time for questions. So class number 1, and you will be able to see by the end of this video if I actually get there. Class number 1 is about Yahweh and who Yahweh was, and specifically I want to talk about Yahweh among the other gods. So we're going to do an introduction to the ancient Near Eastern idea of gods, then similarities between Yahweh and those other gods, unique aspects of Yahweh, what makes Yahweh different from those gods, and then what we as Christians can learn from this portrayal of God. So, who is the God of the Old Testament? Let's start there. I want you to think of words that come to mind. What words do you associate with God generally? I think if you were to ask your average Christian, you're going to get something like loving, relationship. You'll get some that are somewhat biblically astute. They will say the word holy. You will get caring, forgiving. You're going to get a lot of, in particular, I'd say New Testament attributes of God. Those things are true about God. They are in the New Testament. We're looking at the theology of the Old Testament right now. And what was the theology of the people that Jesus came to and lived among? So, one of the things when we look at ancient views of the gods, you can already see something in here in the title, The Gods. There's a commonly held belief that one of the main differences between the Israelite religion and that of the ancients was a distinction known as monotheism versus polytheism. Theism being God. These are Greek. So theism being God, mono being one, poly being many. So many gods versus one God. Now it's quite clear that the ancient Near Eastern religions were polytheistic. We all know this from elementary school. We learn mythology, the ancient Greek and Roman mythology, or ancient Egyptian things. So we read about, I'm trying to remember, like Orpheus and Eurydice maybe, or Theseus and the Minotaur. We can read, when we get a little bit older, the Iliad and the Odyssey and the role that the gods play in those. So we know about the polytheistic nature of the ancient Near East and that there was a pantheon, an assembly of gods that were worshipped. The multitude of gods here were known by how they manifested in the realities of the natural world. Natural might also be too strong, actually, because there were some gods of interpersonal things, maybe gods of emotions. So, like, Aphrodite being the goddess of Eros and whatnot. But these multitude of gods, so there were many gods, and the gods were assigned roles. The gods had roles for things that occurred in the world. So we know this from, actually we'll wait for that. We know this from like Ra was the sun god, right? And there was a god of war. Mars, the Roman god of war. Ares, the Greek god of war. There was, the god of the sea, Poseidon or Neptune. So there were, gods of these natural manifestations. So that's where you get the multitude of gods from, because gods were manifest in the world through the things that you would perceive. Storm gods, crop gods, wine gods, the things relate to gods. There's this parallelism between the material world and this spiritual, divine world of the gods. In the ancient worldview, this is something I want us all to remember. There's no such thing as supernatural activity because everything was perpetrated by the gods. Now, does this make sense to you? I'll try it again here because we might look at this and say, well, yes, of course, that's supernatural. This is an easy place for us to impose our words and categories on ancient thinking. Supernatural carries a whole bunch of freight with it when you say the word supernatural. The way that they would talk about things are as signs and wonders. So the Hebrew word mophet means a sign or a wonder. It's a demonstration of power. That's not the same thing as a miracle or supernatural activity. Because a miracle, something supernatural, assumes the natural. Miracles are events that appear inexplicable by the laws of nature. Supernatural is something that doesn't happen according to nature. But there were no such laws in the ancient world because everything happened because of the gods. So this idea we have that there's an orderly nature that obeys laws, the law of gravity, say, that's one that we know we can all agree on. Or, you've got the Newton's laws, which were, then superseded by so Einstein's work and quantum mechanics and whatnot. But there's ways in which things just work, and we can describe them with mathematical formulas. Yeah, that's like a 16th, 17th century idea. The way that the ancients thought was everything is being done by the gods right now. And so there's no distinction between the natural and the supernatural. So you have many gods that are doing many things. And there's a hierarchy of this many gods. So you have gods of these phenomena like, the sun god, Egyptian Ra. You've got the storm god, the Canaanite god Baal, food and vegetation. So the Akkadians had Tammuz. So we know all of this. So these gods, many gods, are known by their manifestation in the world. And there's a hierarchy. So we're familiar with how some gods were greater than others. So who is the head of the Greek gods? You all know this one. These mugshots right there. This is an artist rendering of the statue of Zeus at Olympia. This is incidentally one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. It doesn't exist anymore. But Herodotus wrote about the 7 wonders of the world. The big one was the statue of Zeus. Zeus was the big guy. There are others like Jupiter, the Roman supreme god, Ammon in Egypt. Gods could be cosmic, so like Zeus, over everything. They could be national. There could be clan gods. So we know one from Acts chapter 19. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. The Temple of Artemis actually is another one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. And Ephesus was like, Artemis is our god. Marduk of Babylon. We know a little bit about Marduk. But there were some areas that had a claim over a particular god. That was for them. And then those gods, though, were in a lower hierarchy from the higher gods. So sometimes in some pantheons it was democratic, in others there was this hierarchy. So the ancient thinking, you have many gods. The many gods pertain to the manifestation of everything in the world. Some of them are greater, some of them are lesser. There were also warriors. Because there's many of them, there's greater and lesser. They're very petty. We know some of these some of these myths. And there's divine conflict. So gods are fighting gods. In fact, many ancient creation stories come from gods fighting gods. Right here, you have the Akkadian, the Enuma Elish. Yes. So Marduk is battling Tiamat. And when Marduk slays Tiamat, the entrails of Tiamat are then used to create the world. So, divine warfare was a feature of ancient gods. And in fact, when ancients would go to war, it would also be seen as a war between the gods. So basically, you were going to win if the gods were happy with you and they were stronger than the other gods. So your gods versus their gods through you, and there's basically a couple reasons you could lose. Your God's not happy with you, so he's just not going to help you. Or your God isn't as strong as the other God. And so there was this perception that the clash between people groups was also the clash between gods. So gods were warriors. There were many of them. They had fiefdoms, jurisdictions. They were related to manifestations in the natural world. They would go to war with each other. And they were creators. So all ancient societies would have regarded the gods as creators. There is not really, not every god was involved in creation, but many of them were. And then you have this constant sustaining activity. So here we have a painting. We're going to go into a whole lot more creation painting from Egypt. So you have Nut, the Egyptian sky goddess, stretched out in a dome. You can see the stars are stitched on the goddess Nut. Then you have Jeb, don't know which, the earth god. So that's the single continent, if you will. And they're being separated by Shu, the god of air. Jeb and Nut used to be a thing. Now they're not. Geb and Nut used to be a thing. Now they're not. And Shu is kind of a hard job, just keeping the two of them separate from each other. But notice how the stars in the earth, in the air, these are all personified. This is, they're in constant sustaining activity of creation. So many gods related to the natural world. They're in a hierarchy. They went to war with each other. That was one of the ways the hierarchy was worked out. And they were known as part of creation and sustaining. So this is the way the ancients thought about the gods. Now we know, of course, that the Israelite religion was completely monotheistic, totally different, rejected the idea of a divine pantheon. Right? Come on, you came to Bible Geeks. You know it couldn't be that easy. I contend that this cultural milieu that existed in the ancient Near East can be seen in the theology of the Old Testament. All right, so for instance, let's look at this passage here. One we know very much, the first commandment. So I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall not have any other gods before me. And here's the question. Is this a rejection of the existence of the other gods? Does it actually say they don't exist? Or does it just say the Israelites aren't to worship any other god? You could say sort of the same thing about the Shema. Does it really say that there's no other God, or just that our God is Yahweh? So we know that the worship of other gods was prohibited completely in Israeli religion, punished. But the acknowledgement or belief in the existence of these other gods actually seems to be pretty widespread, at least before the exile. But the Israelites, the way they saw the divine pantheon was not the same as the ancient Near East, who saw it as kind of a power struggle among many somewhat equal, depending upon where you were, more or less equal divine beings. The Israelites saw it as an absolute monarchy with Yahweh as the king. Let's look at some of these passages where this comes out. For instance, Psalm 29. So this is dated, 10th century BC. So in the opening of this psalm, and this psalm is about the greatness of Yahweh, there's an imperative command, but it's given to the Bene Elohim. The New American Standard is going to translate that sons of the mighty. So ascribe to Yahweh, O sons of the mighty. Ascribe to Yahweh glory and strength. Ascribe to Yahweh the glory of his name. Worship Yahweh in holy array. And the Bene Elim literally is going to mean sons of God. It's the same phrase used in the ancient Near East to talk about the divine pantheon of the other gods. The psalmist here casually brings it up. NBD, no big deal. It's not derisive. It's not rejecting. In fact, the psalm kind of assumes that they're there because the psalmist asks them to join in the worship of Yahweh. There is no evidence in this psalm that these are false gods or gods that don't exist. How about Job chapter 1? The Bene Elim come before Yahweh in chapter 1. The Satan discusses the nature of Job's faith with Yahweh. So, there's an assembly of the gods. 1 Kings 22, we see this is Micaiah's vision of Yahweh and his throne. And then the whole host of heaven is standing beside him. Remember the whole host of heaven from Isaiah 6? And Yahweh asks this host of heaven, who is going to entice Ahab? And he's answered by a spirit, a lion spirit, who says he's going to go into the mouth of the prophets. And Yahweh gives the spirit permission to do so. So we're seeing that there's these other beings. And these other beings are before Yahweh and Yahweh's counsel. It's completely logical to an ancient person that Yahweh has a counsel. Now, Yahweh's completely in charge. Yahweh gives the spirit permission, and the spirit goes and does it. It's also worth saying these are not angels. Hebrew word malach, the angel word, is never used to describe the Elohim. The language is not mixed like that. This is another category. Now, let's ask ourselves a question. Is there anywhere in the Old Testament where the worship of such heavenly beings is permitted or encouraged? No. Do the Israelites do it anyway? Yes. Does it go over well? No. We remember the golden calf, where they were almost destroyed, save for Moses' intervention. Elijah and the prophets of Baal. So you have the prophets of Baal that are trying to, rouse Baal from his sleep. And then Elijah calls down Yahweh. Yahweh brings the fire. And then the prophets of Baal are slain. The Moabite gods, the Baal of Peor. So in Numbers 25, there's a plague upon Israel until those worshiping these other gods were executed. Phinehas, hero, spears. So it doesn't go over well when they worship these other entities. But it doesn't say they don't exist. Key point here, when we're reading the Old Testament, we are reading a document that was written in the cultural milieu of the ancient Near East. In that time, they had this idea of the divine pantheon. The Israelites seem to share, at least in part, this idea. Their texts reflect this. Certainly there's unique distinctions. We're going to get into those. But this is more ancient Near East than it is 21st century American. So if we take this idea, we can interpret some of the other parts of the Old Testament. For instance, Genesis chapter 1. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image. So who's the us? Many of us have likely heard the explanation. This is a dialogue within the Trinity. However, given what we've been saying so far, why is this a problematic explanation? That would be because the revelation of the Trinity is not an Old Testament idea. This is a New Testament idea, and it had to mean something to the people at the time. How could this have been understood by people to whom it was written by the person that God worked through to give us his revelation? So it had to mean something to the ancients at the time. Frankly, the easiest explanation is the divine counsel. Our image here isn't problematic. The image is a differentiator between animals and humans, not divine beings. Remember Psalm 8. It's like when I look at the universe, the work of your hands. What is man that you think of him? Think of him, the Son of Man, that you are mindful of him. You made him a little lower than the gods. We are, as human beings, maybe not exactly the same because we are in this world and we're time bound and we're not before the throne and the council, but we are close to that category. That's the distinguisher. It's a function. It's a status. Some other things that might be said here. So Trinity, again, that's a hermeneutical problem. It could be the royal us, like the royal we, let us make humankind in our image. Come on. That's not what's happening. it is very clear from the context of the rest of the Old Testament and looking at other creation stories that this is in all likelihood the statement of the divine council. So does this mean that ancient Israelites were polytheists? No, like we went over before. Doctrinally, pure Israelite religion was never polytheistic because the heavenly beings are never worshipped. You were never told to worship them. They're never ascribed any power that doesn't come directly from Yahweh. And during the exile, it seems to me at least that God is speaking through the prophets, especially Isaiah, to implore the Israelites to shed themselves of this syncretism, this desire to worship these other gods, which is one of the things that contributed to the exile in the first place. It's a lot of what was going wrong in the northern kingdom where they were worshiping many gods. In Isaiah 44, besides me there is no God. Isaiah 45, I am the Lord, there is no other. Besides me there is no God. Okay, that's pretty clear. I arm you, though you do not know me, so that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is no one beside me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. But we got to repeat it. So, in this being a speech from Yahweh to the people, it's very clear here that there is no other God. So, to whatever extent they might have believed that, Yahweh makes it clear, no, it's wrong. But Yahweh does have a council. Yahweh works through that council, though Yahweh alone is God. When the Israelites get that confused, things go south. Now, we see these other beings in the New Testament as well. At least we see angels. How much do we know about this realm? Not much. But heavenly beings that are not human and are not Yahweh, interact with human beings. The Annunciation of Mary, the Ascension of Jesus, at the tomb. So this does happen. They're not God, they're not human, they're something else. And that does go through the text. Now, what about these other aspects of God? So Yahweh obviously is considered the creator. This is Genesis chapter 1. For the sake of time, we don't have to go into that a ton. Yahweh also was a warrior. The conquest of the land during the time of Joshua, it is successful because Yahweh was with them and because the Israelites worshiped Yahweh through Joshua's lifetime. This is told in the story at the end where Joshua is talking to the people. So, the Lord was with them, and then they were able to have success in battle. And there were parts where the Lord wasn't with them. They weren't successful in battle. So Yahweh, during the conquest period, was also acting as the divine warrior, if you will. However, interestingly enough, and importantly in terms of its distinction, Yahweh doesn't go to war against the other gods. The people that Yahweh is going to war against are people. They are the Canaanites in particular, the ones who are occupying the land, or the enemies of Yahweh. So Yahweh defeats the enemies of Israel through Israel, not by defeating their gods. And Yahweh ends up sometimes going to war, if you will, with Israel when they don't believe. So it's not exactly the same, but it is. It has those echoes in it. Okay, so similarities between Yahweh and the ancient Near Eastern gods. He is not alone. He has a council, though he alone is God. The Old Testament worldview admits of other divine beings that are Yahweh's council. This is clear. None of them are equals to Yahweh. It's not a democracy. It's an absolute monarchy. We also know that Yahweh is the creator. Yahweh is the sustainer who performs signs and wonders, not miracles. This is not supernatural versus natural. And Yahweh is a warrior. Though his war is limited, he doesn't go to war with the other gods. So these are all things that would have made a whole lot of sense to an ancient Near Eastern person. And some of it makes sense to us, but things, Yahweh being a warrior, Yahweh having a council, it's not the way that we often think of God. Now, there are some distinctions that make Yahweh unique among the other conceptions of God that you're going to see in the ancient Near East. Yahweh is jealous. Yahweh has a plan that is unchallengeable, can't be overthrown. Yahweh is a redeemer. Yahweh, and this one here is really strange as far as they're concerned. There's a nurturing relationship with Yahweh's people. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, Yahweh is holy. So just because Yahweh has some of these attributes of the ancient Near Eastern gods doesn't mean that Yahweh is just another ancient Near Eastern god. That is not the case. But it is influenced in some sense by those ideas. But let's look at the things that are unique. First of all, Yahweh is jealous. Yahweh demands exclusive rights of worship. This doesn't make any sense in an ancient Near Eastern context. In fact, it was known that people would worship other gods in the ancient Near East. Now, in Exodus chapter 20, you have, very clear, you will not bow down to the other gods. You will not serve them. I am Yahweh, your God, a jealous God. He describes himself as jealous, punishing the guilt of the parents. In Exodus 34, for you will not bow and worship to another God. For Yahweh is jealous is his name. He is a jealous God. Yahweh is jealous is his name. He is a jealous God from the mouth of Yahweh. That's pretty clear. Deuteronomy chapter 6, for Yahweh your God is a jealous God in your midst, so that the anger of Yahweh your God would be kindled. He would destroy you from the face of the earth. Okay? Don't cross Yahweh. Exclusive rights of worship. Now it's clear, he's not jealous of the other gods. He's jealous of the worship that's sent their way. Now, gods in the ancient Near East were jealous of the position of other gods in the hierarchy, but not of their worship. All gods received worship. And sure, the ancient Near Eastern gods wanted worship from humans, and they didn't care too much if other humans worshipped other deities too. They cared about the divine hierarchy. They wanted, they weren't jealous that other gods got worshipped, but they wanted more. For Yahweh, it has to be completely exclusive. This was different. This was not the same thing as other gods in the ancient world. So the next part, Yahweh has this unchallengeable plan. So the ancient Near Eastern gods would bicker, backstab, betray each other. They would prevent each other from carrying out their will. This divine war, the war between gods, is actually a symptom of this. Because Yahweh doesn't go to war with the other gods because there aren't other gods to go to war with, because everybody's subservient to Yahweh. Instead, what we see is Yahweh's unchallengeable plan. So Yahweh cannot be overcome. This is, Nebuchadnezzar gets this across. Remember Nebuchadnezzar goes mad and then he comes back and it says, when that period was over, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven. My reason returned to me. I blessed the Most High and praised and honored the one who lives forever. For his sovereignty is an everlasting sovereignty. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of earth are counted as nothing, and he does what he wills with the host of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth. There is no one who can stay his hand or say to him, what are you doing? This is not the same as the petty wars between the gods that happen in Greek mythology, where they're trying to beat each other, outsmart each other. You ever seen the movie Hercules? It's not like that. This isn't the War of the Titans. With an uncertain outcome. Yahweh cannot be thwarted. Yes, this also comes across Isaiah 46. I am God, there is no other. My purpose will stand. I will fulfill my intention. Yahweh being a redeemer. So in the ancient Near East, the term redeemer is almost never used to describe the gods. Never pertains to a people group in the very few instances that it is. But Yahweh, on the other hand, restores Israel, his people, on many occasions. We can think of the Exodus from Egypt. We can think of the exile, the return from exile in Babylon. The Judges cycles would be another one. The people are disobedient. Yahweh's punishment comes upon them. They cry out for help. Yahweh sends a judge, and then through that judge, Yahweh delivers Israel. And then there's peace in the land. And then they disobey, and then the cycle goes over again. But Yahweh does continually redeem his people. It is important, though, in the Old Testament, redemption is redemption mainly from oppression. Redemption from sin, that idea for a redeemer, that doesn't really come until the New Testament. We'll now talk about Yahweh nurturing his people. So in the ancient Near East, the prevailing concept was this great symbiosis. We'll spend more time on this later, But Walton summarizes it nicely. The gods had created people to serve their needs. In response to that service, the gods protected faithful people and provided for them with things like fertile fields. This is the great symbiosis of religious thinking in the ancient world. It was benefit-based. The gods reaped benefits from the labor of humans, and the humans reaped benefits from the favor of the gods. So the gods had needs, and that's what humans were for. So if things are going bad, feed the gods, give the gods what they need, and then we will have the favor of the gods come upon us, and then we'll be okay. So God gave him commands through divination, ritual, for the gods' benefit. Yahweh, on the other hand, though, through revelation of the Torah, for our benefit. This isn't a symbiotic relationship. So the gods in the ancient Near East used to, send messages like, oh, I need this. And you could obtain that through divination. And they'd be like, okay, we have got to get the gods this. This is why the fields are dry, because, Baal needs sheepskin. I don't know. And so they would go do the sacrifices, and then hopefully Baal would be pleased, and then it would rain. Yahweh doesn't work that way. It's not this symbiotic relationship. Yahweh reveals his law in the Torah, and that's for our benefit. So the Old Testament is replete with these ideas of Yahweh's love and care for Israel. It far exceeds that of the ancient Near East. Jeremiah 31, for instance, Yahweh appeared to him from far away. I have loved you with an everlasting love, and have continued my faithfulness to you. Lamentations 3:22, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. Hosea chapter 11, when Hosea comes back to buy back Gomer, and that being the analogous circumstance to what happens to Israel. Exodus 19, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured possession out of all people. Indeed, the whole earth is mine, but you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. That set aside nature of it. So far from relying on humans for his own needs, the relationship between Yahweh and Israel is a partnership, where Yahweh accomplishes his purposes for the world through his people. So the ancient Near Eastern thinks of humans like cattle. Yahweh is a father. Maybe the best way to think about this is a good verse to memorize. The tripartite promise, Leviticus 26:12. If you memorize this, I promise, when you're reading the Old Testament, you will see this everywhere. It'll show up over and over. I will walk with you and be your God, and you will be my people. So they are going to be God's people. God will be with them, and he will be their God. This doesn't have a parallel in the ancient Near East. This is a unique thing about Yahweh. And then finally, Yahweh is holy. So this is no better place than in Isaiah chapter 6. So this is the call of Isaiah the prophet, and he has this ecstatic vision. It says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him, and each had 6 wings, and with 2 they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another and said, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. This is the only attribute used to describe God 3 times in the whole Bible. It's never used to describe ancient gods. But the Bible never says God is love, love, love. The Bible never says God is wrath, wrath, wrath. It doesn't say that he's joyful, 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 or happy, 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 or merciful, 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 or angry, angry, angry. He is holy, he is holy, he is holy. So this is the primary attribute of Yahweh, and it is never a description of the ancient gods. And so unlike ancient gods who were engaged in carnal activities, eating, drinking, and they had emotions as fickle as humans, Yahweh is being holy, completely and utterly above that human frailty and weakness. We are not like him. He is not like us. He is perfect and holy. We are not. The gap between us and Yahweh is infinitely larger than the gap between people and the ancient Near Eastern gods. And there was already a gap there. But the holiness of Yahweh, the purity hovering above everything else and being completely categorically different from humans, as opposed to just like somewhat greater but on the same spectrum. that is a unique aspect of Yahweh. So what can we understand about God from the Old Testament? What can we as Christians take away? We can take away the idea that God is the creator and sustainer. This is reiterated in Colossians chapter 1, that, for by him all things were made, and through him all things hold together or consist. So that idea of creation and sustaining, which is reiterated in the New Testament. Yahweh is a jealous God. Only he is worthy of worship. We should not be trivializing or be cavalier about where worship goes. And what does that mean in the 21st century? We're certainly not going to other temples and pinching incense on an altar and worshiping other gods in that way. But the single-minded focus and dependence on Yahweh to the exclusion of all else. Where are we placing our hope? Are we placing it in Yahweh? Or are we placing it in other things to deliver us from suffering? Since that's the main idea in the Old Testament. Are we hoping that things that we can do are going to take away suffering and pain in a way that excludes the work of God? Yes, there are other heavenly beings like angels. They're not gods to be worshipped. Another thing we can take away, God has an unchallengeable plan. God's will cannot be thwarted. Humans, his nurtured creatures that he cares deeply for, his treasured possession, have responsibilities, though, in this plan. So we are to be God's co-workers. Now, God will always succeed, but God is commissioning us and is working through us to accomplish that plan. We can also say that God will redeem his people. And we'll get a little bit more into the redemption bit later. And then, of course, God is holy above everything else. So there's a few potential pitfalls here that we would want to avoid. One of them is that redemption in the Old Testament is not the same as redemption in the New. The Old Testament does not emphasize Yahweh as the deliverer from sin. The Sinai covenant has different provisions. That's blessings and curses for obedience and disobedience right here, right now. Not some future consequence or future judgment. The Old Testament also doesn't command the imitation of Yahweh like the New Testament commands the imitation of Christ. We have a moral example in Jesus. To be clear, that is not Jesus' only role, but we have a moral example in Jesus. We have a living example in Jesus that we are to imitate. The imitation of Yahweh is not something that is commanded in the Old Testament. The holiness is emphasized. We also find nothing of a personal relationship with God in the Old Testament. Identity is found in the corporate community, the people group that you are a part of. Frankly, one could say this may be true in the New Testament as well. Even the Philippian jailer or Cornelius, in both their cases, when they were having their conversion moments, it was them and their household. It wasn't really ever an individual thing. But the Old Testament does not speak of a personal relationship with God. It's not how the Old Testament theology was constructed. So then where does the New Testament take us farther than the Old Testament? We see this in redemption from sin. So redemption from sin becomes paramount in the New Covenant, which is the covenant that we are now under right now. And we also have the Trinitarian theology that comes through. So Trinitarian theology doesn't come through in the Old Testament. That will come through in the New Testament. The us language is divine counsel language. The full revelation of the Trinity is made clear in the New Testament, not in the Old. All right. So that's our spin through the first week of the character of God. Who is Yahweh? What is true about Yahweh? What is not? What is ancient about Yahweh? And what's unique? So I hope this was helpful in thinking about the nature of God, who God is, and what we as Christians can import from that. So next week, we're going to talk about the cosmos, and we're going to talk about humanity's role in the cosmos. So I hope you'll join us for that. Thank you so much, and God bless.